Hello, teachers. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're seeing us from. My name is Janine Matz. I'm an English language specialist with RELO. I'm here today with my special guest, Chelsea Olsen Herkmans, who is an English fellow serving in Peru. Welcome to all of you teachers. Please let us know where you're joining us from. Are you in South America? Are you in other parts of the world? Say hello in the chat to us, please, so we can get to know each other, even if it's just virtually. So today we have a really important topic for all of you. This has been a topic that has been requested several times by teachers, so we decided to listen to your petitions, and we're going to discuss the topic of practicing and polishing pronunciation today. So let's get started. As you can see, we're going to cover different aspects. We have some theory to start with. Then we're going to look at what we call the IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet. We're going to take a look at the color vowel chart, thanks to Chelsea. And we're going to look at AI to support pronunciation. So, to start, we need to understand a little bit of the science behind language and behind how our brain acquires language and uses language, right? So we have several years of research on pronunciation, on language acquisition, and on sound acquisition. And we know from scientific research that from when we are born until approximately the age of 6 to 8 months, our brains are capable of distinguishing between all of the phonemes in all of the world's languages. It's quite incredible. Like, we're born this way. We can naturally do that. But something happens in our brains between the ages of 6 and 8 months that we begin to lose that capacity to distinguish between all of those sounds. And we only become sensitive to the sounds that we hear in our own native language, in our mother tongue. Yes, hello to all of you who are joining us. Hello to Alba from Bolivia. Hello to Veronica from Peru. Yolanda from Bolivia, hello. Thank you for coming. Estela from Peru, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, my first question for you, if you would like to participate and answer in the chat, is, do you have an accent in your first language? What do you think? A lot of us today are native Spanish speakers, right? Do you have an accent in Spanish? And then what about your second language? In the case of English, do you have an accent in English? Please respond to these questions in the chat. While you are responding, I can tell you a funny anecdote that happened to me and my family. So when I was a teenager, maybe about 15 years old, my family and I, we are from Chicago, my family and I traveled to Tennessee, the state of Tennessee, for a family vacation. And if you know anything about the geography in the United States, Tennessee is a state that is considered to be part of the South. So they have a different accent than we do in the North, right? And so we were at a restaurant one day, and the waitress, the server who was taking our order, at the end of taking our order, she asked us the question. She said, "Where are y'all from? Chicago?" And we looked at her like, "What? How do you know that?" And she responded, "Y'all have an accent?" And we said, "No, you have an accent," right? So my point is that we all have accents, really. We all have accents in all of our languages. Even in our native language, we have an accent, right? And that's totally okay. It identifies us. It tells people where we're from when we speak, right? And in our second language, we also have an accent. For as many years as you speak English, you will still maintain a slight non-native accent, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I've lived in Ecuador for 13 years, and I still have an accent in Spanish, a slight accent. And that's okay. That's normal. That's to be expected, right? So it's not a negative thing to have an accent. Okay. Yes, some of you are responding. Yes, some of you have accents. Yes, of course, we have accents in your first language, also in your second language. That's correct. Thank you, Gabby. Okay, pronunciation is one of those skills that takes practice. English pronunciation is particularly hard because of unpredictable stress patterns and what we call deep orthography. So we can classify orthography or spelling into two categories, deep and shallow orthography, right? And English has deep orthography. Why? Because if we have a word in English like the word knife that you see on the slide, knife is spelled with 5 letters. We call these graphemes because they're written, right? Knife has 5 graphemes. But when we pronounce this sound, we only hear 3 phonemes. We only hear 3 sounds, but there are 5 letters. So this means that the sound spelling correspondence in English is not strong, not like Spanish. In Spanish, it's the opposite. For example, if we have a word in Spanish like manzana, right? Manzana has 7 graphemes. And how many sounds do we hear? Also 7, because each grapheme is pronounced and we hear it. And every time we see an A in Spanish, we pronounce it ah, right? But in English, it's quite different. So we say English has deep orthography. And pronunciation is perhaps the only subskill of language that can actually benefit from repetition because it helps us to develop what we call muscle memory. Maybe some of you are familiar with this term muscle memory. Muscle memory is when we, in this case in pronunciation, we make our mouth and our tongue and our teeth, etc., move in a certain way to produce a certain sound, and then our brain is able to remember and associate that feeling with that sound. So for example, a unique sound to English might be the TH sound, right? Like the interdental sound where we put our tongue between our teeth, right? Maybe our students have difficulty with this sound. So what we need to do is make them really be conscious of how that sound feels in their mouth. How does their tongue feel? How do their lips feel? Their teeth when we make this sound, right? And if we repeat it and repeat it, then our brain creates that muscle memory that connects that particular sound to that feeling when we produce the sound, right? So this is a very important part of pronunciation. So whereas repeating grammar structures over and over is not effective for acquisition, repeating certain sounds over and over can be effective because pronunciation is essentially a physical skill, which is different from grammar, right? Okay, I have another question for you. If you could please answer in the chat. I'm interested to see what you have to say. So what are some sounds that are particularly difficult for your students to produce? What are some of the sounds from English that are particularly difficult for your students to produce? You can answer in the chat for us, please. And I give you a little hint here. Maybe they are sounds that don't exist in their L1, meaning their first language. Maybe these are sounds that exist in English but don't exist in Spanish. I can give you an example. In my case, it was the reverse because I'm a native English speaker and I learned Spanish in the United States in school. And I remember that one of the most difficult sounds for me and my classmates was the sound that we call in Spanish the vibrante múltiple, right? That double R sound. So when our teacher tried to teach us to produce that sound, it was extremely difficult for us because we weren't used to making our mouths move that way. So she would have us practice and practice and practice, and we were trying all the time. And sometimes we were spitting on each other, and it was so difficult. And for some students, it took years, and some students could never produce that sound, right? So I'm interested to see what sounds are difficult for your students, right? So Alba says that the R sound as in rabbit because it's different from Spanish, right? Yes, the TH, the CH, the SH sounds, the K at the end of the word. Okay, again, we mentioned the TH. Thank you, Yesenia. The vowel sounds, Tati, this is an important point. That's right. We only have 5 vowel sounds in Spanish, and in English, we have a lot more. Yeah, so this is difficult. The schwa sound, Gabby says. Yes, absolutely. That's included in the vowel sounds. Yes, Jenny says the H sound. Because in Spanish, the H is silent, but in English, we pronounce the H a lot of times. Yes, the U sound. Okay, so there are several sounds that are difficult for our students to produce, right? Thank you for all of your answers to the question. Okay, briefly, we could give a whole year-long class on phonetics, right? But we don't have time. So briefly, we can mention that if we look at consonants, we can classify consonants using 3 characteristics: point of articulation, manner of articulation, and whether the consonant is voiced or voiceless. In other words, if there is vibration of the vocal cords when we produce a certain sound. Okay, so let's take, for example, a sound that is difficult sometimes for our students, which is the sound of the letter V, as in Victor, Valerie, victorious. Yes. This sound is difficult often for Spanish speakers, especially because the V in Spanish is not pronounced as a B in English, and it's not pronounced as a V. It's somewhere in the middle, right? So a lot of times for our students to produce the V sound is difficult. So we can say that the point of articulation of the V, it's a labial dental, because we have the bottom lip and the top teeth that touch each other when we make this sound. If you look, you can see when I produce this sound, right? That is the point of articulation. The manner of articulation, in this case, the V is a fricative, because it is a sound that is continuous. We can continue the sound. If I take a deep breath and I start to produce the V sound, I can hold the sound as long as I can hold my breath. So, etc. Okay? And is the V voiced or voiceless? This is an easy test. I take 2 fingers and I put them right around here on my neck, right? And I produce the sound. I feel vibration in my fingers. Those are my vocal cords vibrating. So this is a voiced sound. In contrast, if I produce the sound of the F in English, as in funny, right? It's the same point of articulation. It's labial dental. It's a fricative because I can continue the sound, right? But when I put my fingers here, I feel no vibration. Nothing. So it's voiceless. Yeah, exactly. So this is the distinction, for example, between the V sound and the F sound. So if our students can produce the F sound with no problem, all we tell them is exactly how you produce the F sound. You just give voice to it. You make your vocal cords vibrate and have them put their fingers here and then turn it into a V. And they'll be able to get it easier. Yeah? Okay. This is the International Phonetic Alphabet. If you know what all of these symbols represent, you can produce all of the sounds in all of the world's languages, at least the consonant sounds, right? So these are organized according to the three categories that I just told you: point of articulation, manner of articulation, and voiced and voiceless qualities. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through these symbols, but you guys can take a look and explore this a little bit more on your own. There are plenty of YouTube videos that help you to understand the International Phonetic Alphabet. So if you are interested in these symbols, you can consult other sources. But today's webinar, we don't have time to go through all of them. Okay, and then we also have, because we've talked about consonants, we also have vowels, right? And this is a vowel chart. This is a black and white vowel chart for now, right? But it shows us more or less the position of the vowels, where they are produced within the oral cavity in our mouth. It's like a profile of a person's open mouth, Yeah. Like I said, this is a black and white version, but now I'm going to ask Chelsea to continue with the presentation so that she can put some color to this vowel chart. So please continue, Chelsea.
Thank you. Okay, to segue into the color vowel chart, I'm going to ask just a question first. And I want you to read this phrase and think about, why is English pronunciation so tricky? So English is weird. It can be understood through tough, thorough thought, though. So what do we notice about what's written on this mug? Particularly the second sentence. What do we notice about it? So I've given us some little clues with some images, and you might notice there are parts of the words underlined, but can we make any connections? What we notice with these words through, tough, thorough, thought, and though? Yes, so they sound, well, let's see. Do they sound similar, or are they written in a similar pattern? So through, or understood through, tough, thorough, thought, though. And if you said that they sound similar, that is completely natural, because even though we can practice and muscle memory with pronunciation, vowels are still very tricky, because our brain is literally processing second language through our first language. So to a Spanish speaker, it might be really hard to differentiate these sounds. So this is an example of how the same vowel letter or vowel letter patterns can have many different vowel sounds. And then there's the reverse. You can have the same vowel sound be represented by different letters. Consider the words blue, soup, to, and moon. They have the letters UE, OU, O, and a double O, but they all have the oo sound. So this is one of the reasons why English pronunciation is so tricky. If we go to the next slide, consider that Spanish has 5 vowel letters and they correlate with 5 vowel sounds. Whereas in English, we have those same vowel letters in the written form, but they can be produced with 16 plus vowel sounds, depending on dialect and different variations of English. So as you can see here, in the blue circles, these are the Spanish vowels and how they loosely correlate to the English vowel sounds. So that is why, and the mug, that is why it's a little tricky. Oh, you can go ahead. So the next reason why English is tricky, so consider this anecdotal situation. So consider that a parent-teacher conference is happening, and you hear a parent ask you, where is elementary school? And your brain, you're trying to process, make meaning, elementary school. Oh, she means elementary school. So something as simple as putting stress in a different part can make or break comprehensibility. So English is a stress-based language, and this is why it can be very difficult for non-native speakers. If we go to the next slide, that is because we can't see where the stress is in the written word. So consider this word family: photograph, photographic, photographer. So the stress, even though this has the same root and it's in the same word family, the stress is in different parts of the word and has different vowel focus sounds. So this can be difficult for learners, and they might apply the first pattern to the other words in the family. So what is helpful for us is if we consider 2 questions that will help with making sure our pronunciation is comprehensible. So using the 2 questions, where is the stress and what color is it? So let's go to the next slide. And we can do that using the color vowel. So this is one approach or strategy that we can use to help our learners to develop phonological awareness and to do it in a colorized way. And we'll see another chart with more color in a minute. But I just want to do a warm up, and you can follow along at home, at work, wherever you are, and just repeat the phrases as I do. Okay, so let's do green tea teacher, silver pin linguist, gray day pronunciation, red pepper phonetics, black cat class, olive sock polishing, turquoise toy voice, orange door explore, rose boat phoneme, wooden hook book, blue moon produce, brown cow vowels, a cup of mustard study, purple shirt word, white tie AI. So these are all of the vowel sounds in English. And this is a way that you can also, you can use this activity with your students. You can choose vocabulary related to the topic that you are studying. For example, we are talking about pronunciation and phonological awareness. So I chose words today around that topic. And doing warm-ups such as this will really help tap into the musical and kinesthetic aspects of learning, and will help your learners internalize those sounds. So if we go to the next slide. So your turn. These are examples of some of the words that we just went over together. So in the chat, can you tell me, what color do you hear when I say the word teacher? Teacher. So I didn't put the anchor phrases here, but so for example, do you hear blue moon, the oo sound in the word teacher? Do you hear gray day, the A in teacher? Or do you hear green tea E? So if you had to choose between those three, do you think it is a green word, a blue word, or a gray word? Okay, yes. So I'm seeing green and tea, exactly. So teacher is a green tea word. Okay, so that's one way. I also see in the chat someone mentioned long versus short. So the color vowel gives us a way to talk about them in a more concrete way. And we can talk more about that a different time, but let's keep going. Let's do one more of these. Pronunciation. Pronunciation. So that A, pronunciation, is that black cat or gray day. So both have the A letter, but what sound is it? Gray or black? Pronunciation. What do we think? Gray or black? Okay, I'm seeing gray. Yes, awesome. So this is a gray day pronunciation. Awesome. So again, this is an activity you can do with your students, do some matching to build their phonological awareness. Okay, if we go to the next slide, one more participation. So what color is your name? So this might be a little more tricky. That's okay. We're just going to try it. So for example, my name is Red Pepper Chelsea and Rose Boat Miss Olsen. So Chelsea, the is the same as Red Pepper. So consider your first name and think of, where is the stress? Which vowel is the focus? It's elongated. So in mine, it's the Chelsea. And then what color is that sound? So go ahead, try it out, take some risks. What color do you think your name is, your first name? What do we think? So I am Red Pepper Chelsea. So your first name, what color do you think? Alberto. So Alberto. I agree. I think your name is a red pepper Alberto. Awesome. Thank you, Alberto. So go ahead. You can keep putting in the chat what you think your name is. We're going to go to the next slide. Okay. So just a couple examples of what this might look like in the classroom. In Yesena, actually, thank you. Sorry, I'm just going to go back really quick. So Yesena, this is really helpful for me as a native English speaker. If I know the focus vowel in your name is a red pepper word, that will help me pronounce it. Yesena, red pepper, Yesena. Thank you. Okay, so some activities. Colorized names, color vowelized names is a great intro to color vowel activity that you can do to build students' phonological awareness by having them do just like what we did. We're negotiating what color is your name, and then you can display it. So these are some examples from my own classroom when I was in the United States. I put on our class door the names of my students and the color vowel that corresponds with their name. And if you go to the next slide, this was really helpful for my Vietnamese student named Me. So if you just look at the written word, you would think that this is pronounced my. It's a common English article or pronoun word. And but just from the written form, students weren't able to produce her name because it had some Vietnamese sounds. So by telling people her name is Green Tea Me, she was empowered to share her name with others and to make sure that they pronounce it correctly. And as an anecdote, I went back to visit my former students right before I came to Peru. And I went to their basketball game and I could hear her not her classmates, her her basketball mates calling out her name, Me. So I knew that she was able to have conversations like this, feel empowered to teach people her name. And green tea was a way using the color vowel to do that. So in your context, if you have students from different groups, like I'm thinking if they have a name that is Quechua, this could be a way to empower your students to teach people to pronounce their names. And if we go to the next one, 2 final activities. This is an example of what's called My Color Vowel Life. So students can create a visual of different things that represent themselves and then discover like what is the color that corresponds with these words. So for example, I like sunflowers. So sunflowers, the focus sound is the schwa, which can also be called a cup of mustard. So sunflowers is a cup of mustard sunflowers. Another word that's connected to my identity is Yooper. So Yooper is a person from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and it's part of my identity. And it might be hard to know which sound you say Yooper, but if I tell people it is Blue Moon Yooper, it gives us all language to be able to, we speak a common language, so we can know how to pronounce this word. And then the final activity, this is what it could look like in an academic English class where students are having to read articles and then analyze, do cause and effect, like different things that you might do in an English class. So ways that you can easily colorize an activity like this is to focus on the new vocabulary words and have learners discover what is the stress and the color of these words. And this will help them produce them. So think of words like photosynthesis. This could be a difficult word to know where is the stress and how do I pronounce it. But if you colorize it and you are categorizing how to produce this word and you think photosynthesis, this is a silver pin photosynthesis. So using tools like this will help your learners to be able to understand new vocabulary and give them a way to easily pronounce them by focusing on the two questions, stress and the vowel quality. If we go to the next one, and then back to Janine.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. I think those ideas are really great and practical and easy to implement in the classroom. So I hope that the teachers joining us today are excited to try them in their own classroom. We need to talk about some tips to correct pronunciation before we move on to the part about AI. This is extremely important to take into consideration so that we protect our students' integrity and their effective filters, which we'll get to in a moment. So one thing to know based on, again, scientific research is that unfortunately, despite all of our efforts as teachers, we know that overt correction doesn't stick over time. What do we mean by this? That in writing and in speaking, and in the case of pronunciation, when we correct students overtly, like openly, we say, no, you pronounce it this way. Unfortunately, that doesn't stick with them long term. So how do they eventually end up correcting their errors in morphosyntax and in pronunciation? Through consistent exposure to the language, right? So the more exposure we can give our students to authentic language, the better they are going to be at producing the language. Grammatically, lexically, morphosyntactically, and phonologically, right? So that's the best gift we can give to them to improve their pronunciation is good input in English, okay? We have to remember also that we don't need to correct absolutely everything. And this goes for grammar and it goes for pronunciation as well. What is the focus here? In theory, we're teaching communicatively in our classrooms, right? So the focus is communication. If my students are able to communicate their ideas and I can understand their message, then maybe I don't need to correct every single nuance of their pronunciation. We have to choose what things to correct. How do we choose what to correct? Well, when there is a breakdown in communication. If our student produces a word that we cannot understand because of the pronunciation of that word, then we should correct the pronunciation of that word. But we have to be careful how to do it, right? So recasting helps. It does help. What is recasting? Recasting is if my student, for example, produces a sound that is not exactly the correct one, like if I ask them a question and I say, for example, do you like coffee or tea? And my student says, I like boat, meaning both, right? Both, the two of them. But if I hear boat, then the student is producing a different word in English. We're not talking about a boat on the ocean. We're talking about both, right? With the TH. So in that case, I could say to the student, oh, you like both. Yeah, I understand. So that the student can hear how I pronounce it and they can see how I pronounce it, but I'm not being invasive in my correction. Right? We don't want to be invasive because if we are invasive, we are going to inhibit the student. Yeah, we don't say, no, it's not boat, it's both. Okay, we can write down some of the errors that we hear our students produce when they pronounce words, and we can comment them at the end of class. In general, we don't need to say, oh, fulanito said this, and Mengano said this. No. We just say, okay, these are some of the errors I heard in your pronunciation during this class. Let's talk about them together. Let's fix them together, right? So it can be a collective effort and see if the students can also recognize what sounds not quite right in what you tell them, right? And like I mentioned, it's very important to take into account the students' affective filters. If you don't know about the affective filter, there have been webinars done on the affective filter on this RELO Andes Facebook page. I encourage you to go back to previous months to learn more about the affective filter. But we need to be sure to protect their integrity, their confidence. We don't want to cause more anxiety for them, because speaking English naturally causes anxiety for our students. So if we are not kind when we correct their errors, and we are not patient, then we are going to cause more anxiety for our students, and it's going to be detrimental to their linguistic development. So that's very important to take into consideration. I see a question here in the chat from Yolanda. She says, how do you address correction with adult students who struggle with persistent errors despite practice? And she mentions in parentheses this idea of fossilization. This is an important question that Yolanda asks us. Fossilization sometimes is very difficult to break. What do we mean by fossilization? Fossilization is when it can be in pronunciation, but it can also be in grammar, morphosyntax. Fossilization is when we have this element of the language that when we produce the language is fossilized incorrectly, right? So for example, this can be with a verb conjugation. People can say, for example, oh, people is nice. No, but it's people are. But the person continues to say people is because it's been fossilized, right? This can also happen on a phonetic level, yes. And my suggestion there, Yolanda, would be basically two things. Number one, expose them to as much input as possible. If you know that there is a particular sound that they are not getting, like the TH sound, for example, we can have them listen to a specific video or watch a video or listen to an audio and pay attention to the words where they hear that sound, right? And then go through it step by step with them on how to produce that sound. Sometimes it's just a question of getting used to, like I mentioned at the beginning, how it feels when you produce a sound, right? Getting that muscle memory going. So we tell our adult students, we say, okay, now take your tongue and put it between your teeth like this. And say, don't worry, we are all going to do the same. So we're all going to look silly together, right? So like this. Do you feel that? And at first they might feel very strange, right? But then little by little, they become used to that feeling in their mouth. And then they start to develop that muscle memory, like I mentioned, right? So input on one hand, and also practice physically producing the sound with them so that they can feel how it feels, okay? Yes. Let's continue.
So some ways to practice independently, or, if you are curious about voice recognition and AI tools, we are going to give you a couple examples of things that you can do on your own using your phone or downloading these apps. So Color Bubble has an app that is integrated into Blue Canoe. Blue Canoe is an app, and it takes voice recognition using AI to give feedback. So you will speak into the phone and say phrases. For example, how is the weather today? How is the weather today? And it will give you feedback about certain targeted words within that phrase and how well you are producing the vowel sound. So it might say, this word you are saying more of the black cat sound, but it needs to be red pepper. So, for example, my name is Red Pepper. So Chelsea, if I'm saying Chelsea, it will give you feedback. Okay, so your name, you want to try to say more of the eh. So I give this example because red and black sounds are very difficult to distinguish for Spanish speakers. So using this app will help raise your awareness, and you can practice using that muscle memory that Janine mentioned, and it will give you automatic feedback.
Okay. And here is a list of a few more, definitely not all, but a few more AI tools that we can use to support pronunciation practice. Here we have a few mentioned. Please, if you know of other ones, please share them with us in the chat as well if you have experience working with them. So we have ELSA Speak, English Language Speech Assistant. This pinpoints specific phoneme errors when we speak into it, right? And it often offers exercises by skill or by topic, and it uses speech recognition tailored specifically for English learners, so non-native English speakers, right? Google's Read Along, which was formerly known as Bolo, is a voice-based reading tutor for children learning English and other languages. So this one is particularly young people friendly. It listens as learners read aloud, and it gives supportive corrections. It is designed specifically to be friendly and low pressure, especially for our young learners, like I mentioned. So this is one that if your students have access to technology, they can use on their own, for example. You can teach them how to use it, and they can also use it at home. Okay, we also have Sounds, the pronunciation app, which is made by Macmillan Education, a publishing company. This focuses on helping learners master IPA sounds, interactive phonemic charts, practice activities, audio recordings that are done by native speakers, and it is especially useful if you want your students to work with IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, alongside their pronunciation. And lastly, we have here TalkPal, which is an AI conversation partner for English learners. It is simulated conversation with real-time corrections. And this one focuses specifically on fluency and pronunciation. We have chatbot-based language immersion for pronunciation and expression. So we can also use this kind of as like as a pen pal. In the old days, we had pen pals, right, that we could write with. Now we have chatbots that we can talk to, right? And they can give us a real-time interaction. So these are all great tools that we can use to support working with pronunciation with our students. Okay, that would be all for us today. So thank you to all of you teachers for joining us, for participating so actively in our conversation through the chat. Thank you very much. You are all invited to join us, both Chelsea and myself, in about 15 minutes on the Zoom session. The link is posted on the Facebook page, so you can click there and you can join us to talk more about pronunciation and how to work with it with our students. I want to thank Chelsea for being here with us today and for all of her very valuable insight on this topic. Thank you, teachers, for joining us, and I'll see you next month. Take care. Bye.